Welcome to the Energy Future Grey to Green World, a debate of energy dichotomy, and in particular, the direction a growing economy like India requires to secure its future. For introduction, he has previously served as ambassador in Cairo, in Brussels, including NATO. His other service at diplomatic missions has included postings to the embassies of Finland in Baghdad, Mexico, Brasilia, and Washington, as well as the permanent mission of Finland to the UN in Geneva. He came to the employ of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in 1976. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for His Eminence, the Ambassador of Finland, Mr. Apo Polo, to give the welcome address.
So, very good friends, ladies and gentlemen. It's a normal start of these welcome addresses to mention a few names. I don't do that because I have 2 pages of names to mention if I start with one. So I just collectively want to welcome you heartily to the humble House of Finland in New Delhi, India. If I'm not totally mistaken, most of you are newcomers to this house, to this compound. So I thought that perhaps I could tell you in brief words a bit of history of this building and of our future plans. This building and the whole compound was designed by 2 Finnish architects, a couple, Raili and Reima Pietilä, and it was done in 1962. Later on in their professional career, they designed in the 1990s the official residence of the President of Finland. Resemblance between these 2 buildings is very clear. So this is the prototype of the President's residence. However, it took more than 20 years after the architects designed this compound it to materialize into what it is today. It was commissioned only in 1986, so 24 years after it was actually designed. And we are very proud of this masterpiece of Finnish architecture. We have noticed that people who come and visit us also appreciate the architecture, a bit perhaps to Indian taste ascetic surroundings, but still they're very Finnish, very Scandinavian, very Nordic. How does this relate to the theme of today? Grey, green energy. It has a direct connection. We have here tonight, with us, a group of Finnish architects and engineers who are planning for the total overhaul or renovation of the compound. Because most of the technical stuff that is in here is coming to the end of its lifespan. So we have to do a major overhaul. That will start hopefully next year. And at the end of it, we hope that this embassy is the greenest embassy in New Delhi. We aim to get a LEED certificate. We know our Swedish friends 50 meters to my left completed their own renovation work some time ago, and they have a certificate that has a label of being gold, just like the frequent flyer cards. They have gold, so it means that we Finns have to beat them at least by one level. So we have to aim for platinum. And this is the theme of this week with our friends from Finland. And when they go back, they start to plan how we can be better than our neighbors in being green. So with these few words, I will wish you a pleasant evening. We will have a very good debate, I hope. Panelists are world famous. And after the panel discussion, we will have dinner and cocktails served. Thank you for coming. I wish you an enjoyable evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Polholm. I would now like to call on stage to address the gathering the President and CEO of Wärtsilä Corporation. Wärtsilä is a global leader in complete life cycle power solutions for the marine and energy markets. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Björn Rosengren.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here in India at this wonderful time of the year. I would say first, thank you, Your Excellence, Mr. Pöhle, the Ambassador of Finland here in India, for hosting this event. And also thank you for all of you for joining this evening. The theme for this evening, Energy Future, Grey to Green World, could not be more appropriate in reflecting the global energy debate. Wärtsilä believes that leadership goes hand in hand with responsibility, and it's supported by strong values. A strong corporate culture is an important element in holding a group together. In Wärtsilä, we have operations in 170 locations in more than 70 countries around the world. Our 19,000 employees all follow the values of energy, excellence, and excitement. A global leader in complete life cycle power solutions for the marine and energy market, we emphasize technological innovation and life cycle efficiency. We ensure the environmental and economic performance of the vessels and power plants of our customers. Globally, the marine and energy markets are going through a time of change. There are fundamental changes in how power is produced, but also consumed. Environmental legislation is becoming more stringent, and increased energy efficiency is in high demand. This is driving a need to developing the businesses in a more sustainable way. Wärtsilä's smart power generation concept has been built to ensure operational and fuel flexibility as well as energy efficiency. It addresses the system level instability caused by the growing energy demand and the increased focus on renewable sources. Sustainable, reliable, and affordable power is a critical enabler for any economy. Nuclear, coal, natural gas, and renewable energy generation, along with the demand-side management, and smart grids have their role to play. But no single technology is a solution in isolation. An integrated approach at the power sector is vital to meet India's growth aspirations. India is Asia's third largest economy. While there are plenty of opportunities to grow and prosper, unreliable power supply is limiting the global competitiveness of the Indian industry, and the economic losses are enormous. India is growing its power infrastructure at an admirable pace, but there must be a market structure which enables investments into the best technologies for current and future benefits. Also, policy planners and developers must focus on optimizing the power system of the entire nation. I am proud that Wärtsilä, with its global experience and the local knowledge, is actively engaged in bringing value to the Indian energy debate by bringing reliability, sustainability, and affordability to the system. Shipping plays a critical role in the global economy, being the most efficient way to transport goods over long distances. Yet the radical changes in the external operating environment have created an urgent need to reshape the marine transport. The exhaust gas emissions and the preventions of spreading invasive species along ballast waters are major concerns for the industry today, as vessel owners seek best alternatives to comply with these tough regulations. Wärtsilä has the right products, services, and the technologies that fulfill the future regulations and maximize the environmental and economic performance of the vessels. Today, Wärtsilä is also well positioned to support the natural gas industry with LNG storage and handling solutions. This to support both power generation as well as transportation needs. Challenges for the future call for rapid actions. Climate change and lack of natural resources require innovative and creative solutions. Wärtsilä has an important role in meeting the world's increased demand for energy in a sustainable way. We offer products and solutions that allows our customers to develop their businesses in a sustainable way. This is the cornerstones in our commitment to sustainability. To conclude, I would like to highlight that Wärtsilä will continue to support the policymakers and the regulators along with the industry to find solutions to the electricity availability to each and every section of the society in a stable and adequate quantity. Distinguished guests, I wish to thank you for being here this evening. I'm sure you will enjoy the panel discussions on energy future by the most eminent panelists, Dr. Pachauri and Dr. Ghosh. Thank you for being here. I'm also happy to see Amil, the representative of the Young India, to anchor this debate. My deep thanks to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a pleasant and stimulating evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rosengren. I would now like to call on stage to initiate the panel discussion on Energy Future, Grey to Green World, the Managing Director of Wärtsilä in India. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Mr. Rakesh Sareen.
Dignitaries, ladies, gents, friends, it's indeed great to be here with you this evening in this beautiful surrounding out here. Energy is vital. Energy is life-giving. And the need for this energy is increasing at a very, very rapid pace in today's world. And this increase in need of the energy is bringing out some interesting dichotomies. One side, we need more energy. On the other side, we need to conserve. Now, one word which comes to my mind is a balance. How to create a good balance. And if we look at a country like India, India is a young country. India is a country of youth. And today's youth is dreaming. And today's youth is well aware and quite concerned on the vital issues like the subject of the today evening. And the format today is very interesting. On one side, we have two people with lots and lots of wisdom. On the other side, we have a youth, we have a student by the name Amil, who has dreams in his eyes and who's really looking forward, what can the youth of today, today's India can do to see that this dichotomy can be handled in a good and responsible fashion by the massive youth population of this country. So with these words, I would like to invite Amil on the stage. Thank you, Amil. And the stage is yours. And wish you good luck for good discussions.
Good evening, one and all. I thank Mr. Sareen for those really kind words. More than a pleasure, it's an honor to address a gathering of such esteemed individuals. Wärtsilä's constant efforts to work endlessly for a better environment have always borne fruit, and I'm sure it will continue to do so in the future as well. Today's discussion is special because we will be looking at certain concurrent issues and problems through a different lens altogether. Ladies and gentlemen, gone are the days when half of the world did not know how the other half lives. In an age of mobilization and rapid technological development, our lives are not isolated anymore. The actions we take are interrelated. Therefore, the participation of every section of society, more importantly the youth, becomes very important in every issue. The youth of today is a conscious, aware lot who has realized that energy is life and vice versa. We are making conscious efforts to preserve this intricate relationship that we have with nature. Having said that, we also need guidance. Your wisdom and our exuberant efforts will pave the way for a better future, because we cannot bear the burden of an entire future generation suffering because of our lackadaisical approach. To help us in this quest, we have two visionaries whose knowledge and experience have given new dimensions to the word sustainability. First up, we have Dr. Rajendra K. Pachauri, who perhaps needs no introduction. His work on climate change has been no less than revolutionary. He hails from Nainital and completed his schooling from Lamart near Lucknow. He went on the North Carolina State University. Gradually, his assessment on global issues like energy security began to get global recognition. For his exemplary services in the field of science and engineering, he was awarded the Padma Vibhushan by the President of India in 2008, the second highest civilian award. He has been the Director General of the Energy and Resource Institute and is currently the chairperson of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Under his able guidance, his team shared the Nobel Prize in 2007 for their work on climate change. We are humbled to have him in our presence. Please may I have a huge round of applause for Mr. Pachauri. Next, we have with us Dr. Arunabha Ghosh. Dr. Ghosh completed his education from St. Stephen's Delhi University and went on to pursue international relations from Oxford University. His research papers and thesis got immense appreciation in the British Circle and world over. He went on to work with the United Nations Development Programme and World Trade Organization and is on the climate change panel of Oxford-Princeton Organization. 3 years ago, he conceptualized and founded the Council of Energy, Environment and Waters, India's #1 think tank and world's #15th. He actively advises governments and civil societies and shares great passion for our environment. We are obliged to have him with us. Please may I have a round of applause for Mr. Ghosh. Welcome, Mr. Pachauri. Welcome, Sir Ghosh. Sir, if I were to characterize the grey environment of today, we will realize that we are facing a lot of problems, right from resource depletion to carbon emission to lack of energy access to various parts of the society and the country. But out of all these problems, which do you think takes precedence or needs immediate addressal, or perhaps the alleviation of which might help us look into other problems?
Well, let me at the outset apologize. I'll have to leave early because I have an IPCC electronic meeting which starts 5 minutes before 7:30. So I'll be very brief. Let me also, since I have the floor, request His Excellency the Ambassador not only to confine the new building that he is going to be setting up to evaluation under the LEED system. We have a far better system, if I may say so, called the Griha system, which is now spreading very rapidly through this country and which would be far more relevant for Indian conditions. By all means, go for LEED and I'm sure you'll get platinum. But I would also request you to get your building evaluated and rated under the Griha system, but I'll send you information about it. On the question that you asked, really speaking, it's not in any way fair to pull out just one single issue that's going to dominate our concerns and that's going to be relevant in defining what we should do in moving from a grey to a green future. As you rightly said, we have problems of energy access, and to my mind, that's something which has been neglected far too long. We still have close to 300 million people in this country, about 1.3 billion globally, who have no access to electricity. And there's a variety of ways by which this can be met, and I want to give you just one example since I'm talking about this particular problem. We have launched a major program called Lighting a Billion Lives, which has now covered about 3,000 villages in this country. And it's very simple. All you do is to train a woman in a village to charge solar lanterns, which we have designed. These are low-cost, lightweight, LED-based lanterns. And she has one panel on the roof from which she gets power to charge all these solar lanterns during the daytime, and she rents them out at night. Now, this is a perfectly viable model, and with a little bit of support, it can really cover the entire country as far as those without access to electricity are concerned. Another example I want to give you is that of using a microgrid. Now, what we do is we train entrepreneurs in villages to invest in these microgrids. Let's say connecting a microgrid to 20 homes costs about 80,000 rupees. And each household gets one light bulb using LED, a little bit of power to run the blower in an improved cook stove, and that changes their lives radically. And they pay 5 rupees a day on the average, which means for 20 households, 30,000 rupees a year. And in less than 2.5 years, you get payback for the money that you invest. Now, this is where we need innovation. But without going into other issues related to the energy sector, I think the point was made very effectively. We need to worry about the efficiency of energy use. And may I say that buildings are clearly one area where we have to make major efforts. Because in the IPCC fourth assessment report, we rated and evaluated each sector for its mitigation potential. The largest potential was in the building sector. And to a large extent, it's also quite insensitive to the price of carbon. So in other words, it's basically something that can be achieved at negative cost. I'd like to tell His Excellency the Ambassador, we would work with you, and every rupee you spend, I assure you, you will save 2 rupees on the cost of the building and the operation of the building. That's one sector where we can make a difference. But of course, in this economy, every sector of the economy requires attention in terms of improving the efficiency of energy use. And that can be done by a set of policy measures, the first of which would be to do away with irrational and indefensible subsidies. So I think what we really need is a package of policy measures by which you give market signals, you have regulatory measures by which you bring about an improvement in efficiency, and also provide signals for the development and dissemination of renewable energy technologies. If, let's say, kerosene prices were to be rationalized, I can assure you people in rural areas will go in for renewable energy on a large scale. And of course, it's another matter moving to large scale and centralized forms of renewable energy supply. If I have time, I'll say a little more about the prospects for that. But I'd like to have Dr. Arnab Ghosh also speak, so I don't want to hog all the time myself.
For sure,
even
sir.
though I would be leaving in about 10 minutes or so.
For sure, sir. Sir, when Sir talks about visions of certain policies by bringing in different parts of society together, but what often happens is in the ground reality that the vision of these policies is often not manifested into its execution. So what is that major divide we see that even in every 50-year plan, we have this huge vision of a lot of installments of different thermal plants, but in the execution takes a lot of time. And in that gestation period, we incur a lot of losses. So how do we bridge this gap between proper vision and proper execution without much difference?
First of all, thanks, Amil, for your introductions, and thanks to the ambassador for inviting me here. A lot of the comments in the introductory speeches were inadvertently, I think, in error in equating Dr. Pachauri and me. There is absolutely no justification in those comments. I'm honored to be here in his presence and look forward to learning from his comments. To answer your specific question, I think we have to first understand, who is determining the vision, right? Because if there is a gap between the vision and the execution, perhaps there's a problem with how the vision is in itself being developed. And in that sense, I would argue that in this case, at least in the case of the 12th five-year plan, I think an extra effort was undertaken by the government to have a much more broad stakeholder engagement with private sector, with civil society in different parts of the plan. Our organization wrote the Water Resources Framework Study for the Planning Commission. We've been involved on the energy side as well. And there are several other organizations that have been involved. So one point is to have a much more multi-stakeholder approach. And this has to go beyond rhetoric. This has to go beyond rhetoric. Why? Because when we talk about execution, then your feedback from the ground level has to be much more real time. a lot of the, let's take one major energy consumer, which is not often mentioned, are irrigation pump sets and the irrigation system, right? Because we are pumping large amounts of water from one place to another. Now, the way the plans are structured is that you have plan expenditure, which is allocated. But once that allocation has been made, there is no institutional mechanism to evaluate the execution. Right? On the contrary, if you work with water user organizations, or say in the context of what Dr. Pachori was mentioning, the people actually building or actually running microgrids, unless they are participating in an immediate feedback, whether it's through district mechanisms, state level mechanisms, which then feeds back to the national level, we will always have this disconnect. I mean, after all, India is a continent-sized country, and you can't expect that, and you can't even put all the blame on people sitting in Delhi. They are doing their job. We have to develop those nodes in the connection between them and those who are executing on the ground.
Okay. So, sir, when Sir talks about developing a hierarchy of feedback mechanism which engages people on all levels, so we need to understand that this requires a lot of awareness on a lot of environmental issues and therefore the connect from people. So in a country where there is so much spatial distribution of population and so many different problems, how do we plan to achieve this hierarchy of mechanism, or how do we plan to achieve 100% awareness and subsequent efforts that people make?
Well, I really think we need to bring about some major institutional changes. You know, if you look at the electricity supply industry in this country, which is essentially in public sector, how did it originate? There used to be a department for electricity in each state government, and that functioned essentially like any other departmental undertaking or any other department of the government. Now, while these were changed into state electricity boards and in later years these were corporatized, the fact is the philosophy under which they functioned and the methodologies by which they took decisions have not changed radically at all. So I really think what we need to do is to bring about a very clear understanding of the changes that have to be brought about, the transformation of the institutions that are in the energy sector. And this is where I think we would also need to ensure that these are insulated from the legislative bodies, interference by politicians, by bureaucratic systems, and so on. And I think, as Dr. Ghosh rightly said, you need the involvement of people at the grassroots level. We have not created the conditions for that. You see, even if you look at something like the Pollution Control Board in a state government, I see no reason why a pollution control board at the level of the state, or let's say in a large city or any entity whatsoever, has to report to the government, because then typically it's going to be subjected to the same pressures, the same kinds of infirmities that you find in the government. Why should it not be possible, let's say in a city like Bangalore, to have a pollution control board that reports essentially to a group of eminent citizens, and they function in a manner that allows everybody to provide inputs? I can assure you, if you were to bring about such an institutional transformation, the body that you create will be far more effective than anything that exists anywhere in the country today. So I think the time has come for us to make a sharp break from, the kinds of mindsets that we have, and perhaps demolish some of the holy cows that we have set up. We've got to bring about a major change. It's only then, and let me end by just saying something that comes from a major conference that we're organizing right now called the International Conference on Digital Libraries. We've got 500 participants there, about 200 from overseas. And today, in this day and age, if you were to provide connectivity and the ability for people to access information in every remote part of this country, can you imagine the kind of empowerment that you would create? But that's not going to happen with the wave of a wand. You've got to firstly create the infrastructure, and most definitely, if you were to look at rural areas, you have to provide energy. Now that energy necessarily will have to be decentralized in a large number of cases. If you're going to rely on the grid, then the farmer in Punjab will get power only in the middle of the night, and he's going to leave his pump set running, which is very inefficient to start with, because he's not paying for every unit of electricity that he consumes. He just pays for the lousiest pump set that he can buy in the market, because he's not paying for the power. And he over-irrigates his field with all kinds of environmental problems. So I think what we really need to do is to ensure that you also provide knowledge, information, and financing opportunities to people in the villages who can then start setting up facilities. And while I have the floor, let me give you another commercial. Tomorrow we are going to a place in UP, in district Sitapur, where we have developed a refrigeration system that uses agricultural residue. Now, if such a technology could be disseminated, could be used on a large scale with costs coming down rapidly on account of economies of scale, it would change the lives of farmers across the country. So I'm sorry I've said a lot, but I'm also doing this because I know I'm not going to be sitting here, and then Dr. Ghosh can carry on with soliloquy without my interfering with what he says.
So with the few words that you've spoken, I'm sure you have initiated a whole lot of new vision. Sir, when Sir talks about dissemination of technology, and that's a very important aspect, because we know that a lot of research has been undertaken in a lot of places. But to create a proper established market to use that technology so that it goes out to different people from different sections, what do we have to plan to achieve that, especially in a market like India?
I'm going to answer that question with an anecdote. About a year ago, a colleague of mine, he's actually in the audience here, Rishabh Jain, he and I were covering parts of rural Karnataka, investigating different business models. When we use the word business model, we often equate it with the technology and something about revenue or something like that. What we seldom try and really understand is what motivates the demand. Right? A banker, an investor is interested in the number, the amount of demand, but we don't dig enough, almost with an anthropologist's lens, of what is motivating that demand. So the anecdote I want to give you is this is this hut we came across in a forest in Dakshin Kannada district. So this man is a farm laborer. He does not own his patch of land. He is effectively squatting in the forest with a thatched house. He has one daughter who's a nurse and works in Bangalore. His two other daughters living with him. His wife has passed away. Although he's squatting inside the forest, he's not foraging from the forest. Within his little patch of land, he is growing some vegetables, and he is conserving water. He's got a little pipe that's collecting rainwater into a pot, and he has a solar panel on his roof. Right. So this man is effectively invalid, cannot go to work, and has no regular source of income. Any banker, I can place a bet, would never have invested in the company that reached out to service that energy need. So we asked him, of all the reasons, why did you take a loan of, this is not free, there's no subsidy, why did you take a loan of $400 to get a solar panel on your roof? And I'll tell you this, I was not expecting the answer he gave me. He said, you look at my shirts, and those of you who are familiar with southern India know that there's a culture of, no matter how poor you are, to wear clean white shirts. So he said, when I was using kerosene, and Dr. Pachauri was talking about the subsidies on kerosene, I was spending 50 rupees a month on detergent powder. Last year, 50 rupees was $1, now it's about 90 cents. Now that I've got solar, I'm spending 20 rupees a month on detergent powder. Now the point is, 20 rupees a month is not what the banker is looking at. But the reason I'm giving you this example is that unless we ascertain what drives energy demand, not just having macroeconomic calculations of what we estimate energy demand to be, we will not be able to figure out how to actually deploy technologies. Technology is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself.
Taking a cue from
In fact, if I may pick up from there,
for sure, sir.
the point that's being made is that when you move to clean sources of energy, there are just so many co-benefits
That's right.
that you're able to realize. I mean, in these households in district Jagdishpur, which is one of the poorest parts of UP, we found exactly the same thing. You ask the women, what's the benefit that you got from this microgrid? And they said, we have clean homes now. Because you see, they get a little bit of power for running an improved cook stove, which has a blower, and therefore there's no soot. Their health is much better. Their children are not exposed to all that pollution, and their homes are completely clean. So this is one benefit. You know, when you talk about mitigation of emissions of greenhouse gases, one major benefit is lower levels of pollution at the local level. A second benefit, or co-benefit, is much higher energy security, because if you use clean energy, if you use energy more efficiently, then you're also, in a sense, enhancing the security of energy supply in a country or globally. The third reason is that you also generate many more jobs through some of these initiatives. I mean, I can tell you, His Excellency, the Ambassador is going to set up an efficient home over here. The kind of employment you generate, but of course with much lower overall costs, will be much higher with some of those technologies and some of those techniques than if you were to just construct a box, as you find being done by a number of architects all over the city. So I think I should get ready to move on. If you allow me a minute or two,
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that it's a great pleasure and privilege to be here. I feel sentimentally attached to Wärtsilä because Mr. Mantosh Sondi was a very dear friend and someone who I looked up to. I also had the privilege of delivering a talk in his memory. And I also want to tell His Excellency the Ambassador that I have a Finnish connection because I have an honorary professorship at the University of Eastern Finland in Joensuu. And the university maintains an office for me over there, and I was there about 3 months ago. And I've been to this house a number of times. It's something that always strikes me about Finland. It's a small country in terms of the population, beautiful in terms of the expanse of nature that you have over there. And I traveled around quite a bit just 3 months ago. But the excellence in technology, in its deployment, and the understanding of how you can bring about efficiency in the use of all kinds of resources is something I think the rest of the world must learn from. And I think if we want to deal with the energy problems of this country, I think you have to bring about a gain in efficiency at every stage of the energy cycle. And I don't know how we're going to make that happen. You certainly need better policies, far more rational pricing, but you also need to bring about a change in mindset and skill levels at every stage of society by which we focus on things that really require innovation, and each one of us is capable of bringing about innovation. So if you'll forgive me, I'll have to leave now. I just want to say thank you once again, and I'm sure you'll have a wonderful session. You've got a very bright, capable panelist over here who is going to hold you spellbound for the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those kind words. With the little time, sir has been able to throw light on every nuance we need to know to understand environment better. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank
Thank you so much. Let's pick up from where Sir left. When Sir talks about more efficient and more clean sources of energy, however, that requires a lot more understanding when it comes to the society. So now the fact that you went around different parts of southern India and tried to understand people, so that requires intense determination to go ahead and research and assess the environmental problems. So how do we further incentivize the young people or more people from this part of the country to go ahead and start putting research and start pursuing academics when it comes to environment?
Well, since your question was prefaced by us taking off from where Dr. Pachauri left, I'll also begin to answer your question by my brief Finnish connection. And it's not as honorable as his, but it's an important one. Several years ago, I used to work at UNDP as one of the authors of the Human Development Reports, which I assume all of you are familiar with. It gives the ranking of all the countries in the world on several indices we create, including the Human Development Index. Now that particular year, Finland, if I recall correctly, was either number 1 or number 2. And usually it's in the top 5, so that's not a surprise. The surprise was that in New York, in our office, we hosted a delegation of Finnish parliamentarians who wanted to meet with the Human Development Report team. And the one question they were all part of the Education Committee of Parliament. I might be misnaming it right now, but broadly they dealt with education. The question they had was, what should Finland do about education? Now, that year, what I know for sure is that in the education part of the index, they were number 1. So I was baffled. Why should a Finnish parliamentary delegation come all the way to New York to ask, what do we do about education? And so we answered the question by asking them the question, why? And they answered that we know we are number 1. So the only way we'll go is down. So we want to stay on top, and we want to think, what is the curriculum we need to have in place in 2020? And remember, this was the conversation we were having in 2005. So they were planning the curriculum for Finnish children in 2020, in 2005. The reason I'm using this example is your question relates, what do we do to get students and the youth excited? And despite my wife counting the number of gray hairs on my head, I think I can attest to being part of the younger part of India than the older part of India. So what do we do to get them excited? I think the number 1 thing you got to do is get them out there. Make them see things that they think that they are only reading about. You know, when we've been working on off-grid energy, it's not by reading just what the books or the journals have to say. We've got to go and engage. Number 2, get them to begin to tinker with solutions. At the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, we are right now running a project on what we call renewables beyond electricity. So we are looking at applications in cooking, cooling, heating, mechanical power, that renewable power energy can be used. All of this is stuff that students can be engaged with. This is, when we think of the grid, when we think of big centralized systems, it seems like something that you got to go through several college degrees before you would even be allowed into that premise to learn. But the opportunities in energy access, in energy technologies, in energy-related business models are all in the decentralized space. Not to say that the centralized grid-connected system is irrelevant. It's very much important. But to get students and youngsters excited, you've got to tell them that here are all the opportunities waiting for you to pick up and run with.
That's rightly said. Exposure to certain ideas and innovations really helps because you can get theoretical knowledge about any issue. But when you go out there in the practical realm, you realize there are much more to it than what you read. So let's broaden the scope of this debate. Let's talk about energy security. India is a rising economy. Globally, we are a force to reckon with. However, that will come at a price because we have to engage in policies regarding energy security as well. So, at present, in status quo, what is our plan regarding 2050, the future? What is our vision when it comes to energy security?
The short answer is I don't think we have a clear vision of what would account for energy security in 2050. The long answer is actually more complicated but more important, is what would be needed, what would be parts of the toolkit to have energy security, or I would add to your question, resources security for India. And I'll give you the mantra that at least I follow, and in fact, in my research, I'm trying to develop this further. The mantra is matrix. M for markets, A for assets, T for technology, R for restructuring, I for infrastructure, and X for the X factor. I think for any policymaker in India, you need this matrix as your toolkit for energy or resources security. Let's take some examples. At the end of the day, you have to rely on markets. That means if we are today trying to secure gas from Qatar, or coal from Australia, or oil from Saudi Arabia, we largely focus on these long-term contracts because we rely on these bilateral relations we have with countries to give us some security that we'll get the resource that we need. The result sometimes is that we overpay because you're not playing in the spot markets for resources. Now, spot markets are, by definition, more risky, but you've got to figure out what is the right balance between us not taking any risk at all and taking some risk so that at times we can benefit from the lower energy prices when the business cycle changes. That then leads us to the second part of the toolkit, which is assets. To what extent should India really be going and acquiring energy-related assets around the world? Does owning an oil block in Nigeria, for instance, necessarily ensure that oil from that block will reach your shores when there is a crisis? The answer is maybe, maybe not. And therefore, again, when we are looking for asset acquisition, we've got to take a much more nuanced view rather than saying, oh, China is doing it, therefore we must. That then brings us to the more interesting parts of the toolkit, the technology innovations that Dr. Pachauri or I have been talking about. Restructuring of the economy. If we deal with the fossil fuel subsidies, if we focus on energy efficiency, the negawatts, where we actually make money rather than spend money, that's a restructuring that we've not really put on the table with as much focus. And then there is the infrastructure part, which is what is the optimum infrastructure design that we need to transport our energy resources? Most of our coal lies in eastern India. The biggest power plants now, thermal power plants, are coming up in western India. All our oil and gas, large terminals for importing oil and gas are along the western coast, obviously, because we are importing it from West Asia. But much of the new resources perhaps lie in the Bay of Bengal or beyond in the South China Sea. So how do we design where to build the ports, where to build the pipelines? And finally, the X factors, certain things that the unknown unknowns. Even 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when I first came to this Wärtsilä event, along with our chairperson, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, the shale revolution had not yet really captured the imagination as it has today. Now again, this revolution might be short-lived or long-lived. There are different estimates. But there will be X factors that you will have to be adaptable enough to incorporate. But if we stick with this matrix methodology, then we get a more nuanced, a more stable, and a more resilient vision for energy security.
So when you talk about engaging in import and export with different countries regarding energy and its availability, so what kind of global cooperation are we looking at in terms of India's? Which are the countries that in a future regard we can plan as our allies when it comes to fighting the same battle against the environment as they are fighting?
You know, the climate negotiations ended just last week, the latest round of the annual negotiations. And usually in the climate negotiations, India and the United States or India and the developed world are at odds. And we say that, that's because we are a growing country, you guys have pumped all the CO2 in the atmosphere, so we must be living in parallel universes. When you actually dig under the surface, you realize a lot of issues are common. Take even something as basic as energy access. Okay. There are immense debates happening right now this winter in the United Kingdom about energy poverty in the United Kingdom because a large proportion of the population is unable to pay the energy bills. Last year we hosted the first director of ARPA-E, the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy of the United States. And in his lecture and in our discussions, we discovered that the United States is equally thinking about decentralized energy. Why? Because they've also gone through massive grid failures. It was my third day in New York when the entire northeast of the United States and Canada shut down. So they are thinking about decentralized energy, not because they need access, but that's a backup. That's part of their energy security strategy. If you look at Japan, which has to shut down its nuclear power plants, because that's the decision they've taken. So again, they have to look at new ways of increasing their energy efficiency. So Japan, where executives have always been known to be wearing suits and ties, has introduced this concept of cool biz, where suddenly the ambient temperature in office buildings has been raised to 27 degrees, and you show up in half sleeves without a tie. The reason I'm giving you these examples from developed countries is that if we sit down and scratch under the surface beyond our solid negotiating positions, we see there are so many commonalities that it's not just India having to work with the developing part of the world, but the developed world, the emerging economies, we all have common problems, we've got to solve them together.
Solving problems, definitely an issue. But when you talk about different aspects of energy being available, when you talk about a market, you've also discussed at length the idea of energy mix, where people get energy as per the demands. However, different energies should be available to different people as per their need. So how do we bring about this idea of energy mix and inculcate it within the society that exists in India as of now?
Again, we have a lot of debate in the country about, what would be the ideal energy mix. Of course, we know coal is the big share, but, I think for a country of the size of India, you will have coal, you will have natural gas, you will have a bit of nuclear, you will have renewables, and you will have the decentralized part of the energy infrastructure. But again, let me try and answer this question in a slightly different way, which normally does not get discussed, at least in Delhi. We've been analyzing some survey data from 110,000 households, a pretty large sample for any country, from the National Sample Survey, on what would energy access really mean, and how are rural and urban populations dealing with their type of demands for energy. One of the most surprising results we are finding is that even in rural areas where incomes are rising, as incomes rise, consumers are unable to shift away from firewood. Now that is a really surprising result because the theory will tell you that there's a concept called the energy ladder. You get richer and you start using more modern sources of energy. So you switch from firewood to maybe charcoal briquettes, you switch from charcoal briquettes to kerosene and maybe LPG and maybe direct connection to the grid. Now why are rich households in rural areas not doing that? That's not because they want to go and fetch firewood from the forest. It's because we are unable to provide alternative sources of energy to them. So income is just one side of the equation, and as India as a whole becomes a richer country, there will be a macroeconomic implication for the types of modern energy sources we will need. We want to replace our bullocks with tractors. We don't count that draft power that serves our energy needs, right? But even as those incomes rise, we have to think, where are we going to supply that energy from? And that's why I think we need to look at these several different sources. In fact, I believe that we need to go through three transitions. One is the energy beyond the grid, which is focusing on decentralized energy. The second transition is the energy beyond electricity. the ideas I was giving you earlier about other applications of energy that go beyond switching on a light or fan. And the third transition is the energy beyond energy, which is to think about the nexus between energy and water and the environment and air quality and the land.
Your company having done so much research and assessment regarding the climatic change, in the next 20-30 years, should our planning be based on better disaster management, or should our planning
and focused on mitigation? But I wish Dr. Pachauri were here, since he heads the IPCC. The latest report is unequivocal in terms of climate science. Even if we stop emitting every new molecule of CO2 into the atmosphere from tomorrow, we've pumped enough into the atmosphere that temperatures will rise. Over the last century, temperatures have risen by about 0.8 degrees Celsius, and there will be a creeping increase in temperatures. I am certainly not very optimistic that we'll be able to keep to the 2-degree target. That means adaptation has to be front and center in all our planning. And for India, what is the most important part of adaptation? It is the link to water. India is the most vulnerable country when it comes to climate change, and water is going to be the biggest driver of our stresses. So unless we figure out how to make our irrigation infrastructure more efficient, unless we figure out ways to conserve water in our urban areas, unless we figure out how to improve efficiency of water use in industry. Our organization just released a report on water yesterday on urban water and sanitation. We will be in deep trouble.
Having really analyzed on how we can use the natural elements like water and integrate them into making an efficient and more sustainable part of society. To throw more light on this, we have one really great visionary with us in the audience, Mr. Suresh Prabhu, the chairperson of CEEW. We would like to ask him one question, and I'm sure his guiding light would help us a lot. Please, may I have a mic arranged for Mr. Suresh Prabhu?
I think Mr. Prabhu should come here.
Please, could you join us, sir?
Mr. Prabhu, please come.
Welcome, sir. Yeah, just one.
I want to ask a question.
Oh, you want
You have to answer. I can take the back seat.
So, closing comments on this discussion. When will a country like India can achieve 24/7, minute-by-minute reliable energy?
You know, we have been saying this for a long time. Our target was 2 years ago. We had said energy to all by 2012. So I think normally we make very good, as you were saying earlier, and you asked that question, why is the vision and the reality so different? And that's because we make promises very quickly without thinking about it. So I think if you can actually do the planning and find out, when we say electricity to all, what does it really mean? If you really look at, as you very correctly pointed out, if you really look at where the energy is going and why people need that electricity, if you know that properly, so rather than demand-side management, if you do demand-side assessment of what is really needed, then supplying that electricity will be easier. Why we have failed is because our idea was that we'll create huge generation, then we'll have huge transmission, and then finally people will get electricity. But that's never going to happen. And in fact, good that it has not happened, because that opens a lot of new opportunities. And those opportunities will probably bring in win-win situation, because they will be environment friendly, they will be addressing energy security issues, they'll be actually doing the assessment of what is available locally, the resource of generating energy, as well as satisfying the demand, which is maybe completely different from district to district in India, maybe if even from not only district, but maybe even a sub-district. But at least you go by the district. So I think if you really do that first, all these assessment and everything else, then I think we'll be able to really provide an answer to your question, when we'll be able to do that. Because then we'll actually really understand why we want to do electricity, how we want to do it. So I think we should do that exercise first. But I think it should be fair to say that if we do this exercise properly in the next, say, 2-3 years, and then we really plan it properly, then maybe in a decade from then, we should be able to satisfy the demand very easily. Because if you go by solar, which is available in each and every village of India, at least 99% of the villages of India, because it's already shining every day. So therefore, if you can actually convert that resource into electricity and energy, it will be possible in a shortest possible time. Again, if you really look at biomass, which is not necessarily available everywhere, but there are some pockets in Punjab, for example, we generate a lot of biomass. Unlike talking about Finland again, there is so much of biomass, I wish it was the situation in India. But if you go by that, do that assessment and then work out on it, it will be very easy. So I think we should do that very quickly, then try to plan it, and then we should give a decade to implement it. I think we should be there.
I'm sure, sir. Since we are a little short on time, we will have to wrap this discussion up with these words. What gathered we have today, we have understood the fact that regarding perceptions of certain problems is very important. The way we perceive our public, the way we understand consumer engagement is the way we can create technologies for them. Today, our discussion, Mr. Ghosh, Mr. Pachauri, and Mr. Prabhu, we have understood the fact that it is not impossible for a country like ours to achieve this idea of sustainable development. However, we have to start making efforts from right now, from the very roots, so that we can achieve a society that everyone dreams of. On that note, I would like to thank all of you for witnessing this discussion. I would thank Dr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Amit.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Sir Prabhu. Hope you have a wonderful evening. I would like to hand over the mic to Mr. Siddharth. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen, for the insightful session. Can I now request Mr. Rakesh Serene to come on stage to give the concluding comments and vote of thanks.
Wow. Indeed, a very, very stimulating 45 minutes what we witnessed just now. Thank you, Dr. Ghosh. Thanks a lot to Dr. Pachauri. Thank you, sir, Mr. Prabhu, for very, very valuable comments what came here. And I know each one of us have been getting certain thoughts, linked to what was spoken just a little while ago. Some very interesting themes which emerged during the discussion. Innovation was quite high on the agenda. We are talking of lighting billion lives. We are talking of microgrids. We are talking of refrigeration through the agriculture waste. And the list is endless. At the same time, we also discussed about how to take R&D into the market. How do we deliver what is proven in the intelligentsia society? How do you reach the masses? We also discuss, I think, very heavily on engagement of the people. How do we engage the billion people? How do we engage the youth? How do we engage the people who want to take the next step? And then, multiply. How do we come to the tipping point? We heard a very interesting word when it was, vision to the reality. And Dr. Ghosh mentioned very interestingly the concept of toolkit. And he defined the toolkit through matrix, where X is the X factor. And absolutely correct, 3 years back, and now the shale gas, who knows what is going to happen next year and 5 years from now, because life is big, and this planet is big. And a very innocent question which came from Amil, to a very eminent personality like Mr. Prabhu, that when do we get this reliable power? When I can get my microsecond reliability into this such a high potential country like India? And I think the answer was very appropriate. It is an optimistic answer. And I know that all of us sitting here, there's a huge influence in this launch of Finnish Embassy. And we all are powerful in our own way. So how do we take these ideas? Maybe today someone has picked up an idea and dwell on it and engage more people and multiply, and we reach the tipping point, and could be the start of a good change. With these few comments, Let me thank our ambassador here. And more than him, let me thank the First Lady of this embassy for hosting this great function for all of us out here in this beautiful environment. Thank you very much, Madam. Thanks to Bjorn for coming here every year, and it really encourages and shows the commitment of Wärtsilä technological edge for a country like India. We are truly committed. And last but not the least, I think this evening is a good evening because all of us are here. Thank you all very much for coming here. Thank you, Mr. Rakesh Nath, for being here. We truly value your wisdom in the electricity sector. You have contributed a lot. It's very nice to have you with us. Thank you, Mr. Prabhu, once again for coming over. And the thanks are not enough for each one of you sitting out here. Please enjoy the evening. Join us for the cocktails and dinner. And I think we may discuss some more good ideas while the evening is still young.